We're going somewhere today that I don't think many shows go. Not because it isn't important, but it tends to stay out of the public and maybe even lands on therapists' couches. Have you ever wondered why certain things like speaking up, trusting someone, feeling like you're actually allowed to take up space? Maybe that feels harder than it should. Today, we're going to talk about something that might be the reason. It's called the father wound. And even if you had a great dad, this one might still be for you. So stay with us because this is the Better You Show. Hey, welcome back to the Better You Show. I'm Doris, known as the Chaos Calmer. And I'm really glad that you stayed because today's conversation is one that I have genuinely been looking forward to. The Better You Coach team is with us. We have Coach Sarah, who's our resident leadership abundance coach, Tiffany, our hypnotherapist and mindset coach, and Joyce, the happiness igniter herself on happiness and harmony. We also have a very special guest joining our coaching team today. Kevin McNee is a men's connection coach, mentor, and facilitator. He's the founder of Men for More, a movement dedicated to helping men do the deep inner work of healing, presence, and heart-centered leadership. Kevin creates what he calls a ripple effect. The idea that when a man does the real work on himself, it doesn't just change him, it changes his relationships, his family, and everyone around him, which, let's face it, is so true. But here's what I want you to know about Kevin that might surprise you. He's also sat with women, specifically around what he calls the wounded masculine and the father wound. The experience of women who have moved through their lives without ever having a safe, trustworthy masculine presence. And he's witnessed firsthand what opens up in a woman when she finally heals that. Kevin, I'm so glad that you said yes to being here today. Welcome to the Better You Show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad I said yes too.
So Kevin, I am going to start with you because I think our audience needs to understand what we actually mean when we talk about the father wound. Not just the obvious cases, but the more subtle ones, the women who might be watching right now thinking, my dad was fine, this doesn't apply to me. What is the father wound and how does it actually show up in a woman's everyday life?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it shows up in a multitude of different ways. And it shows up, in not trusting, whether it's not trusting yourself, but not trusting people to support you or to ask for help, being maybe more controlling than you'd like to be. Feeling like you need to be seen. You need to be, have yourself heard in ways where we heard of. I mean, there's the term boss babes, right? It's something that, I believe that a lot of women and the feminine have been hurt by so many men in ways that they don't even realize. And, like you mentioned too, is you might have had the best father, but maybe didn't receive exactly what it is that you needed to show up fully, openly, and to be in your divine essence as a woman. And that shut you off from that. So now you operate in your relationships, in your business, in your health, all the way to where you are right now. It's shaped you. The journey has been difficult because it's been hard to open up. It's been hard to trust. It's been hard to let people in. So that's just a few of the ways that I've seen that show up. And, a lot of the women that I've worked with, they come to me because what I speak to with, people pleasing and, having to take on everything and putting everything on our backs and doing it all, that's been their norm. And they relate to that, not as men, but as women as well. And they've never felt safe with another man to be able to like open up and have that space held on an emotionally connected level.
Yeah, and I don't think that dads do this on purpose. I think they just don't know any better, right? They just don't know how to relate to her as a woman or what was intended and what was taken in. There was a disconnect somewhere.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'll just to speak for the men and even, like, the generations back of our fathers and grandfathers, they were in survival mode, right from the wars and, they're in survival mode just, you had to work hard for everything that you had. You had to, scrape by with everything just to put food on the table, right? And that's continued down on an emotional level. So it's like, hey, if you weren't feeling good or if you were sad or if you were sick, it's like it didn't matter. You had to show up because if you didn't, everyone else suffered around you. So we talked about the ripple effect in the beginning. There's also a negative way that happens, and that's bled down into all of us. And throughout times with the wars happening and men getting taken away from their families and coming back as traumatized men, or wanting to hide what they're feeling and going through and losing that in the bottle, or, going to work and just diving into work and not being available for their families. They're doing amazing things trying to provide, but that's how they felt is provision. Whereas myself as a man, but also you as feminine women, you need more. There's more to it than just like, here's a house, here's food, here's money. What else do you need from me?
Yeah, they were doing exactly what they were trained, what they thought was the best thing. But yeah, and I even think back, like, my dad was a great dad, but my parents were divorced.
Mm,
So I lived with my mom, and my dad lived several hours away from me. So it's not like he could be there. I mean, he's doing his very best, but there was
mhm.
a disconnect there.
Yeah. But as a child, it's I mean, as children, the world revolves around us, right? So in that situation, you might make that mean that your dad doesn't love you, that he's not there, that he's abandoned you, and you can't trust men because the one that you're supposed to trust to love you the most in this whole world isn't there for you. So whether he was doing the best that he could with what he knew, and looking back, it's easier to see that now, but in that state, it's like, no, I can't trust men because the one who is supposed to be the most trustworthy and loving towards me, he isn't. So how am I supposed to trust others? So I need to take care of myself. I need to look out for myself, and I'm going to build this wall and shelter around my heart and not let anybody in. That's what I've witnessed in a lot of the ladies that I've worked with, and men too, right? Is like, there's a lack of trust, and men specifically as well have a really hard time trusting men, especially to open up and be like talking about like, actually, I'm actually really sad right now, or I'm grieving, or I'm really struggling. It's They've never been taught to do that, and we were never taught that from our fathers and grandfathers.
I think it's so important that you say that about men because I think they get a bad rap these days. And really, it's from their upbringing, and always been doing the best that they can as well. So I think that is really important. They're going through their own stuff as well in our society, right? So,
Yeah.
what is a step that somebody can take, like a practical step, to kind of start healing that father wound? Like,
Mm.
I definitely have that, and so it's like, um, just like like, how do I get in touch with that more?
Hmm. I think one thing that comes up for me right away, Tiffany, is just acknowledging that it's there
Mm,
and knowing that by feeling this way and experiencing this, it doesn't mean that your dad did anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you have a terrible father or that you're blaming him or making him wrong. It's just how you feel.
yeah.
So I think one of the most important things for anyone who's listening to this, anyone who's navigating, some challenges in their life and it's around their father, just knowing that it's okay to feel how you feel. No matter if your dad was the king of the world and gave you everything that you could ever imagine, is like there's still ways that you were hurt by his actions or inaction. And just being able to be okay with that. And one of the things that really supported me was writing down what comes up and just allowing myself and the words to flow, even if they weren't kind, even if they showed up this way, because they're there for a reason. And the more that I hold on to them, it's actually just hurting me internally, whether it's causing disease or frustrations or anger, or burying my thoughts and taking out on my kids or on my partner, wherever, whatever that looks like. And that's how a lot of times how it shows up.
Yeah. And analyzing that story, right? Like, what's the story? What did I make it mean about me? That's been so huge for me. 'Cause I realized, "Oh my god, I thought I was unlovable, or I felt this like, this meant this," and it's like, "No, that's absolutely not the case," and
Yeah.
maybe he was just having a bad day. You know,
Yeah.
who knows, right?
Yeah.
But, reframing it has really been useful.
100%. And, and being okay with that. It's like, oh, I recognize that I felt unlovable in that moment, and that's okay. Right? I am, and reframing that as like, I am lovable. Look at all the people around me and look at what how I've been showing up. I am lovable. So that old story is not true, right? He was
Absolutely.
just loving you in his way.
I love that you're recognizing it, and then you're not judging it, and then you're reframing it.
hmm
That's a pretty great break there.
I think that's the key is not judging it. I mean, you can, you can to start out with, and you may very well do that. But then going like, okay, even my judgment, I can accept that because I've done that. It's now that's all a pattern. But if I can accept the fact that, you know what, my dad was the best man, I would never actually ever dream of having another father. And there are ways that he didn't show up for me. And it shaped how I grew up. And it shaped how I show up in relationships, and it shaped what I'm afraid of, and where I hold myself back, and all of the things. And that's okay too. All can be true.
Mhm. And talking about relationships, so this is a place I've often struggled with, because of the trust issue, right? So,
Mhm, mhm.
what would you say, to, like, a couple struggling? Let's say the woman has the father wound and she's taking it on her partner. Um, what's kind of a way back to some peace or happiness in that relationship?
Mhm. The number one thing for men to receive as an invitation is acknowledgement. So instead of looking at all of the ways that he's not showing up or the ways that he's broken trust, which is, it might be like a laundry list, right?
Yeah.
Right? But acknowledging him for the ways that he is.
Mhm.
And as if you were telling him what to do or being like, you need to do this or you need to do that or whatever, that is being in your masculine essence. The masculine is the doer. And we all have both masculine and feminine. So it's not about men or women. It's wanting to, if you want to be able to trust and open up and really connect and deepen that relationship, allowing that feminine to be able to receive the love and the trust and all of that we want to create in relationships. It's to help him. And yes, he's going to have his own work to do 100%, but acknowledging the things that he's doing right really will help encourage him to show up in different ways. And by no means am I saying that the men don't need to show up better, because we do, right? There's men they do get a bad rap, and there's a lot of talk going on right now. There's a narrative about, men aren't showing up, men aren't doing the work. Where are all the good men out there? There are good ones out there, and the ones that maybe aren't showing up in the best versions of themselves that they can be, they just need to open up to doing this work and looking at themselves and knowing that because they're making mistakes or because they're not showing up as the best versions that they could possibly be, that's just a starting point, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean they're not enough. It doesn't mean they're not worthy. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that that's a really good place to start, and that's where things shift.
Absolutely.
One thing that I personally have experienced from my dad was I always say he's the greatest dad in the world. I grew up like a princess, so I had expectation in my relationship, my partner to be like my dad.
Mm.
So that gave me a friction because I was expecting so much more, and I was comparing. And then I realized that he is someone different. he's past, he's who he is today. It's not nothing to do with my dad. It's just I created um that idol, that 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 figure that my partner needs to be like my dad.
Hmm.
And that gave so much disruption and in our relationships because I had some kind of expectations. But I broke that when I realized that, as you said, acknowledging who that person is,
Hmm.
he had brought a lot of strengths in our relationship too, which I was ignoring because I was always trying to compare with someone that I grew up with and I loved, and I wanted to be with someone surrounded with same kind of emotion, same kind of support. And that was fine because I was a child. But now I'm in a relationship, being a partner or wife is different. So being present and acknowledging that person, that who he is, I think, or she is very important. And then take a relationship from there.
That's a powerful piece.
And I think that touches on something that I see a lot of in people is that they're always looking outside of themselves. But really, like Coach Sarah just said, it was when she realized it, when she did the work on herself. You can't change other people.
Hmm.
It's you. And of course, you definitely need to communicate. You definitely need to talk to them and explain what it is that you need because they can't read your mind. But you need to do the work first and
Yeah.
then go from there.
That's it. That self leadership is so important, right? And, by us doing our own work, whether, man, woman in the relationship or on your own, doing your own work is that leadership. And it's an invitation for others to change, right? And some don't. Right? I've had men that I've worked with, I've had women that I've worked with that when they start doing their own work, their partners don't. They're so resistant to it because they're unwilling to look at their own part in that. But when they do, the depth of connection and commitment and deepening of that relationship, it's the most incredible I've ever seen. It's what I've been able to witness in my own self is just continue to deepen the work in me and commit deeper in my relationship to continuously doing it and being able to hear what my partner has to say is like, you know what, when you say this, it actually makes me feel not okay. When you do this, it makes me scared or whatever. And it doesn't mean that I'm doing anything wrong. It just means that I this is what happens and how I'm showing up. And if I don't want that, it's up to me to make a shift. And the last thing that I want to do is ever hurt her or have her feel afraid or, you know, unworthy or unloved. So I can take that feedback and receive it and start showing up in a different way. But it's a dance. And, if you're in relationship for a long time, it can take a while to dissolve that. And just to keep on going for a little bit longer here, one of the things that I've seen too is when people they've built their lives. Like, I mean, I'm 46 years old. It took me a lot to get to this point. It's going to take a lot to shift those old patterns, those old beliefs. So just because you're maybe the one that's doing the work and you're shifting and your partner's not quite buying in, well, you've built a big part of that relationship being this certain way. And because you're shifting, it takes time to build that trust, right? I'll say a lot of the men that I've worked with, when they start showing up in the way that their wives have always wanted them to, and they don't trust it because there's all of this backup and proof, 5, 10, 15, 20 years of being together, of showing up this one way. And it's like, oh, now you're going to show up. Now you're going to love on me. Now you're going to be like, have deeper conversations and buy me flowers and have date nights. Well, it's going to take some time to dissolve that. But that's where on the other side is like, now you're getting what you wanted. Just because you have this history doesn't mean things can't change. So don't hold that against them.
And a lot of the things that you say, I mean, we called it the father wound, and but really, it's just it's human behavior. because all the things that you say, everyone has baggage, and treating people the way that they want to be treated sometimes takes a little bit of training. Or when you're shifting that, the training needs to shift, right? And then acknowledging the progress that you're making rather than complaining about it and mistrusting it, I think goes a long
Yeah.
way as well.
I do Mindful Mondays in a seniors community here in Kelowna. And, we talked today about acceptance, and it was really powerful. And these, they're in their 70s up to 90s, and we're having conversations on mindfulness, and we really talked about acceptance. And what showed up for me this morning was letting go actually isn't a physical act of like letting go, right? How you've treated me for the last 20 years we've been together, it's not about just like letting it go physically. It's about being able to accept that that happened and not carry it any further. It's like, if I see that there's shifts being made and changes happening, yeah, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to show up in the same way as he did or she did at some times. But noticing all of the ways that they're shifting and doing that work and trying to, and just accepting what happened, but also being able to like open your eyes to the ways that they're showing up. And this is for both men and women, because acceptance is a powerful piece. And the more that we can just accept ourselves and accept others, that's the way to let things go and truly just like find that inner peace and freedom and really that growth together.
Beautiful, Kevin, what you just said. And I've experienced from my personal life as well. Acceptance is so big, so huge. And that puts you yourself in such a peaceful and fulfilled state of mind. And you're not carrying any baggage at that point. You're not making any stories, you're not putting any biases, no judgment. And that helps you or us being free. You're not attached with their emotions as well.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if we all just accepted each other for exactly who we are, how much easier relationships would be. And, it would just be peaceful and free to show up in the most authentic way. And that would invite us to continue to do the work to get better, I feel like. And, I also don't want to make it seem like if you're being treated in a harmful way, or if the person's like not, like not showing up in relationship to actually like feed the relationship, you don't have to accept that. You can
Absolutely.
invite them. You can invite them to be different. Acknowledge them for how they show up, and encourage them and reflect what you see in them. But it's also important to be like, you know what? This is what I feel. This is what I'm going through. This is where I don't feel like I'm being supported right now by you, or how you're showing up, and whatever that is. So it's important to be able to have those conversations. And if you can't, that's a really powerful reflection of, what needs to be worked on. Right?
Absolutely.
If I can't speak up for myself in a relationship with the person who's supposed to love me the most in the world,
Mhm.
then what's showing up in me, right? What's showing up in them, or what is it that I need to work on?
Often we deal with narcissists. And when
Mm,
it comes to the narcissistic personality, what one thing you would say how to deal with that kind of if you had a narcissistic parents or father, and that's what you have learned, how to deal with your relationship and your partner when you see the same pattern, how to break that.
mhm. Yeah, I've had experience in this. So thanks for asking that. Narcissistic personality disorder, it's another one of those labels that we can, and it gets tossed around a lot. Like, if this person's not showing up in the best way, is like they're a narcissist, right? But it is a real thing. And one of the things is we all we magnetize the people in our lives that are meant to highlight what needs to be healed in ourselves. So oftentimes, if you've attracted a narcissist or a narcissistic person, well, you likely have that wound, or you likely had a narcissistic parent. And that's something for you to work on. I know for me, the hardest thing was to trying to get them to change, right? And or to make them understand. It's like, why can't they just see my side of it? Or why can't they just understand what I'm saying or see that like I was doing the best that I could? Yes, I made some mistakes and all the things, but it's really about doing that work on yourself and knowing that you did the best that you could. And no matter what they say, being okay with that and know that it's likely not true. Because if we're using that term, the narcissist will push your buttons so that you react. And when you do, then they're like, see, I told you that's what you were like. And that's right back to square one, it feels like. But that's all part of the work. It's going through the reactions and recognizing it's like, oh man, I don't want to be like that. And just doing that work, knowing that when you become solid within yourself, no one else can penetrate that bubble, right? And that's really the work that I see, in myself, but in the others too. When we're not looking around outside of ourselves for validation, and we just validate ourselves, there's nothing that really can hurt us. And that's, that's a big part of it too. The father wound leading back to that. When we stop looking for validation from our father and start giving that to ourselves and loving those little versions of ourselves that needed it from our dads, then we can be free to attract the people that are more aligned with the version of ourselves that we're truly meant to be.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And like you all were saying, accepting someone for who they are doesn't mean keeping them in your life either. Right?
Great point, Doris. That's a absolutely bang on.
Because accepting people for who they are, if they don't fit and you've been communicating together, because you're not going to make that judgment without truly communicating and talking to each other, and then realizing, okay, well, that is just who this person is. Do I want to stay in this relationship? Because I can't change who they are.
That's right. And just recognizing too that it doesn't have to be forever. None of this has to be forever. It could just be a time. Maybe they actually need to be out of your life for a while so that they can go sort out their own stuff and come back in their own best way, right? And loving people from a distance, that's been probably one of the most difficult practices that I've learned, but one of the most necessary ones is loving them from a distance. And if they do want to re-engage or reconnect in relationship too, I'm always open to it, but there's going to be some agreements.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the kind of conversation that changes things, and you were here for it. The fact that you watched this today all the way through tells me something about you. You're someone who likes this and takes this seriously. And you deserve support that takes you seriously too. So if you're curious about what that looks like, head on over to BetterYou.coach, book your free call, and find out. No commitment, just clarity and a path. Before I let you go, Kevin, I want to say that you're doing important work, and I want everyone to know where they can find you if they'd like to get in touch.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that acknowledgement. Like I mentioned, the acknowledgement is very much appreciated. People can find me on Instagram at Creating the Ripple and on my website, www.menformore.com.
Excellent. And we'll make sure that all the links are in the description so that it's easy for you to click over. And I want to say thank you to all the coaches for being here, all the fabulous questions and discussions that we had today. And to you, most of all, always remember you matter. So please take care. See you next time.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, thanks for watching. Since you watched this video, we thought you might really like this video. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe right there for more great videos. Plus, tap that notification bell so that you don't miss any videos at all. Comment your thoughts below and see you next time.